SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
If you're feeling anxious about your investments with all the economic volatility and chaos in Washington, tune in to SuperTalk Jackson on Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m. and Sundays from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. for Element Wealth Radio with Jeremy Nelson. Learn more at myelementwealth.com.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
And it's July 4th Friday Eve, too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man. How cool is that? What's your plans? Anything?
Fireworks Eve.
Anything you got planned?
Oh, yeah. I got a buddy that's having a cookout I'm going over to, and probably going to gorge myself over there. But, yeah, besides that, the only other plan I have is to rewatch Independence Day at some point, either today or tomorrow.
So you're defying the wishes of some of those who we pointed out yesterday who said it's canceled. July 4th is canceled. You didn't cancel it, did you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. They don't make my schedule.
Well, after the show, I'll be headed up to Old Waverly, meet my son up there. We're going to play a little golf later today, and then tomorrow. Then they have a big 4th of July celebration. Looking forward to that. And then a firecracker scramble on the 5th. So we should have fun. Looks like the weather's going to be good, just hot, right?
It is July.
That's right.
In Mississippi.
That's right. So we should be expecting that. So we got a bunch going on. So the first question I got to ask you is, have you bought your new Trump cologne?
I stopped wearing cologne a long time ago, so no, I don't have any Trump cologne. Wow.
Well, some chicks dig it, you know.
I use Old Spice deodorant, and that's got enough smell on it. Trying to blend Old Spice smell with a cologne it's smarter than my nose is.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call that cologne exactly.
No, but it's a masculine smell, and because I like the Old Spice deodorant,
yeah,
I'd rather just go with the Old Spice deodorant and no cologne than trying to find a new deodorant or a cologne that can work with it.
I got you. Well, the president, in fact, you've seen this, right? There's a new cologne, the Trump cologne.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, he's put his name on everything else. Why not?
Got Trump phones, Trump cologne. What else we got?
Trump hats. You had the Trump Cybertruck, which I don't know about that one anymore, but...
Oh, yeah, that's right. I don't know what happened
Trump
to that.
University and Trump Tower and Trump Casino, which...
So true.
One of those three is still there.
Yeah, that's true.
Trump steaks.
Yeah, I forgot about
shoes.
that. The Trump steaks. Yeah.
Trump plates, Trump coins.
Oh, me. Well...
I can continue.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's got a cologne, baby. Does the President Trump. So this just came out. What's it? I think it's just called Trump Cologne, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that there's any. I'm looking for it. I don't know if there's anything else notable about the way it was styled. It's a Victory.
45-47.
That's exactly right. Victory brand of fragrances for men and women. The president says, I think this is their slogan, have fun and keep winning. Right?
When I think of cologne, I do think of fancy bottles. Cologne and perfume, fancier bottles.
Okay.
I'm looking at it now. It looks like a Trump version of the Oscar. Like the bottle itself is the pedestal for a little mini gold statue.
Yep.
It's got his signature in Sharpie on the bottle.
Yep.
And for the women's perfume, it's a rose gold bottle with a gold figurette.
Yeah.
And for the men's cologne, it's a gold bottle with the gold figurette.
Well, we'll see how that does. You know, sometimes I get out of here, and I'm sure you feel this way. We've never personally talked about this, but sometimes you leave and you feel like, I felt like there was some unfinished business. That's almost every day.
Oh, yeah. There's always something we could have talked about that we didn't.
Or something that came up, and it came up late, or we just didn't get to it. Sometimes that comes from the text line, as you know. And we do our dead level best here to get to all the texts, and if we don't read them and respond and discuss on the air, at least we try to respond back to your text via text. Well, yesterday, I can't find it. It takes a little bit to search for it. You might be able to, but somebody texted in. It may have been the same one that didn't realize we're on a 3-hour show, that made some reference to whoever was just on in the 11 o'clock hour, which would have been me and you discussing something. And it really had to do with the folks that have decided that they're just not happy about the country in July 4th. And this person tried to sort of rationalize that. Well, these are the reasons they're not, because everything's just so unfair and so terrible and bad and all that stuff. But you recall one of the statements, I think it was this person, was that we are blaming welfare recipients for welfare.
I think that was a different
person. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So I apologize to the person, and we didn't name anybody, so nobody knows here. In fact, this was just
naysayers never give their names.
It's just a random phone number. That's fine. You're welcome to do that.
It's chicken, but you're welcome to do it.
601-875. 601-879-4395. 879-4395. That's the C Spire text line. You guys know it's open, and anybody can send us anything they want. We don't guarantee.
Within reason.
That's right. If it's not, we're just going to ignore it, is what's going to happen.
Well, no, I mean, like, you don't send us crazy exotic file types.
Oh, that's right.
We can't open them.
You're talking
we can't open the majority of video types you send us.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. But this person, whomever it was, this individual, we don't know their identity. And that's fine. You don't have to reveal it. Just said, well, you guys are blaming welfare recipients for the explosion of welfare and the spending on welfare. And that's simply untrue. We've never attributed the problems in these various transfer payment programs, because that's what they are. We've never attributed that to the recipients. I do regularly point out
yes and no. We've never attributed it to the worthy recipients, the legal recipients. We've attributed the problems to the ones that are mooching and the ones that are wasting the money, that are defrauding the government.
In terms of the waste, fraud, and abuse, you're absolutely right. If they're engaged in that sort of activity, well, yeah, they are individually responsible for that. And by the way, you guys have seen the DOJ blew open a case a few days ago involving Medicaid and Medicare fraud, and it involved providers. And you and I many times have said, it's not just the subscribers. There's stuff going on in the healthcare industry as well. They're unfortunately unscrupulous, dishonest medical providers. They're humans.
Well, because of defamation laws, it's hard to talk about doctors being unscrupulous because they're the few people out there that can afford to frivolously sue you.
That's true. That's a good point.
But that's kind of what's being hinted at when we bring up this whole notion of, well, just about anything in Medicare or Medicaid fraud. And when we were talking about how, we got to have this or that for Medicaid to save the hospitals. And it's like, You already got doctors that are having to double bill just to make it in.
That's exactly
make ends
right.
meet.
And it's also fair to say because of the reimbursement in the program, not that I'm condoning it or excusing it whatsoever, but it does tend to, shall we say, serve as a catalyst for a lot of the double billing and the fraud committed on the provider side. And in this case, they found people that illegitimately got approval from older, unsuspecting people for certain services or products or so forth that are healthcare items that are reimbursable under the programs to just game and suck money from the government, right?
I mean, to put it in simpler terms that are a little bit more concrete and easy to understand, if you go in and the doctor uses a tongue depressor and they bill that, well, they actually bill 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. That way they can cover. And the sad thing is that's totally legal if they're doing it to insurance.
That's exactly right. That's how it's viewed. So, but I just want to make the point that I believe it's the system that we've created that's been the major cause of the explosion of welfare. In fact, we're doing a disservice to many of the recipients by just bolstering and boosting and expanding the system. It's the problem, and that's what I rail against, notwithstanding those who are engaged in fraud. Well, of course, that should go without saying, but I'm more about the system and the need for reform. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio, California Congressman Ro Khanna at 11:05 today. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard Gibert. Let's do this. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
After midnight, we're gonna let it all hang down. After midnight, we're gonna chug a lug and shout. We're gonna stimulate some action. We're gonna get some satisfaction. We're gonna find out.
Welcome back, everyone. That is that's from the All Hit Request line. Appreciate that, Rhino. And I will now explain the purpose of the tune, requesting the tune. It's because the vote on the rules associated with the big, beautiful bill, allowing it to advance to the floor for more deliberation, occurred at 3:30 a.m. this morning, after midnight. What do you think about all these members of Congress having to stay up? Do you think people feel sorry for them?
Oh, poor pitiful them.
Oh, man. To be expected, though. And right now, by the way, folks, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, he is still at the well. He's going on, 6 hours now, I think. And he says he's going to talk until he can't do it anymore to block the big, beautiful bill. So, of course, seated behind him, from the view, in the field of view there, are other members of Congress on the Democrat side. So this is what shocked me, Rhino, just watching it. I can't hear it. We don't have the sound on, obviously, in the studio, but just watching on a split screen on the business channel. He just got a standing ovation. That guy, I don't think would ever inspire a standing ovation. He, I don't want to get too critical here, but I guess I will. He lacks charisma. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah.
I think he's generally a good person. I don't agree with anything he says, at least 99% of it. And
That's one of those X factors, to pull a buzzword from the past.
what's that?
The X factor, but one of his one of the X factors you need to be a successful politician and not just a propped up politician.
Yeah,
is stage presence.
he just doesn't have it.
There's
man.
not really a good way to teach it or learn it. You just got to have it.
It's innate. That's exactly right.
I mean, you can stand more proudly. You can project your voice. You can do certain things to enhance your stage presence. But he doesn't come across with any command of anything.
You know, you're so right. And some people just have it and some don't. And you're right. You can improve on that. I actually took some classes. Like, they were hour-long classes. I took 3 when I was going to Wall Street to pitch. I just wanted to make sure, that my pitch would be received well. And that includes, of course, your not only your presentation, the content, but your delivery, your stage presence, as you put it. And I hired a local consultant. It was a professor at Millsaps that did this on the side. And she was fantastic, I got to tell you, and pointed out things I just didn't know. I mean, but when you study that, and you've studied human behavior and reaction, you incorporate that into your
stuff
training.
like body language.
That's no doubt about it. And so,
I say simple. That seems to perplex about half the country.
I agree. So, you watch me every day. I have a propensity to use my hands when I talk, and that's my Italian heritage, as they say. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it can be overboard. But what she taught me is it's okay, but you can't make it look fake. It's got to look genuine. Like, this is normally how, and it's normally how I am. I mean, it's how I speak and how. And so it's generally not perceived negatively. I've never heard anybody say, "You use your hands too much, Gerard. I speak a lot." Some people do, and that's the problem. Did you not feel like that Governor Ron DeSantis maybe got some coaching when he was running for president? Because there was the DeSantis, the candidate, which was unimpressive in his speaking and delivery. And his, they get him on video, and he kind of shaped that very fake.
Yeah, he got some bad advice.
He got bad advice, right. So the other thing she got on to me about
Same could be said for Ted Cruz when he ran.
That's totally true. This is the Ted Cruz is the senator, and the Ted Cruz is the candidate. And the former, honestly, was more appealing. President Trump's the same, no matter what. Now, after doing some training and I think just having a lot of practice, I feel like I was able to get to a point where, it's just who I am when I'm in front of all these decision makers, whether we're in this forum, this venue, this setting, or we're in my office, talking about business matters. One of the things she advised me on that I've got to check myself, and it's, I guess, a product of my Southern upbringing. I don't have too thick of a Southern accent. I mean, you don't either, but still, when you're in New York, it's definitely detectable. Of course, most people think, "Are you from Texas?" They think everybody that has a Southern accent's from Texas. And you know as well as I do, there are different versions of the Southern accent depending on where you're from. I've always been fascinated with dialects and accents in this country. And there are people that are experts that tell you to the exact mile, where you're from based on hearing your pronunciation of certain words. But she criticized me for my pronunciation of the word was. It's not was, W-U-Z. It's was, So I have to check myself on that. And I don't know. You just grow up speaking that way, and those are hard habits to break.
I think
she's
one of
right.
the hardest is the word pen.
Oh, you're right about that. Pen and pen. We say P-I-N and P-E-N the same way, right?
Oh, yeah.
What do they call those homonyms?
It's a pen.
Right, exactly.
Not a pen.
Right. How about, there's a numerous other words,
yeah.
right? We could go on and on and on. I won't even open that door. But the point is that this Hakeem Jeffries guy, he doesn't instill, I guess, a lot of energy, and I'm just shocked that they had a standing ovation. Of course, he could have just
an
said
example
something.
of someone that love him or lump him. I'd rather lump him, but that's just me. Nancy Pelosi, she can be a bit of a hand talker.
Yeah, you're right.
But she utilizes it with enough stage presence to where people will stop and listen to what she has to say.
You're right.
Whereas Hakeem Jeffries, he could be flailing his arms like those inflatable tubes at the car lot, and nobody's going to want to pay attention.
Yeah, it would look totally staged and choreographed and sort of pre-planned. And then DeSantis with the smile, what the heck was that smile all about? It was so phony. And I know he was trying. Somebody instructed him. You know that. And most of those guys, they're well advised to get professional help for stuff like that because you can't see it. It's hard to sort of self-evaluate and correct, analyze. But there are professionals. But there are
professionals in politics that analyze and group test and poll and do everything they possibly can to put a number on stuff like the scuffing of your shoes or what color your tie is or how tailored your suit should be. They got
no doubt
consultants for all kinds of crap that they waste money on in campaigns.
And let's be honest, people do respond to that. I've always thought people largely vote emotion. And, I think you have to be who you are as well. I think that comes across. If you try to act a part that you're really not or depart from your true self in your dress, in your speaking, all the above, in your body English, folks detect that. I mean, it's your senses pick it up. You don't have to be a wonk, to understand that. It's different than
it's almost like we
out of their
developed
mouth.
a sixth sense to seek out and avoid lying.
No doubt. It's totally true. Yeah. Never trust a hand talker on the C Spire text line. Advice from my Iowa-born raised father. Well, I freely admit that I like to accentuate my diction with hand movements. I have to check myself on that sometimes. I don't want it to get kind of overborne and overused, but I think
just
again,
avoid knife hand.
Right, that doesn't look
aggressive.
Good. Yeah, I agree, and I don't do that. Nancy Pelosi liked to put the fingers together with a thumb. Right, that was kind of her trademark. But you're right; you sort of paid attention to it. I mean, it worked for her. You didn't think, well, that looks crazy. Now, what came out of her mouth was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But and the president and the lunatic Zoran Mamdani, they continue to trade barbs. The president said he will not allow New York City to turn into a communist wasteland. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he's not going to let New York fall into the hands of communist leadership. And I applaud him. And you're seeing now the independent former Democrat current mayor of New York, Eric Adams, he's having like fundraisers with the right-leaning wealthy New Yorkers that are trying to avoid this nutcase from getting...
Yeah, because they can't really get behind the Red Beret dude.
Yeah, the old Guardian Angels guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's done good stuff.
He has.
He just, again, no stage presence.
No stage presence. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio. It's Congressman Ro Khanna at 11:05, State Senator Nicole Boyd at 12:05. We're in the Element Well studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert. It is on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Love is but a song we sing, feels the way we die. You can make the mountains ring, or make the angels cry. Though the bird is on the wing, and you may not know why.
Welcome back, everyone. That's the Youngbloods. Everybody get together. That was kind of from the protest song Journey. That kind of has a sort of a subtle protest theme to it. And that was, of course, during the Vietnam
It was the transition
War.
away from peace and love to make love not war to we hate war.
That's a good way to put it. I think that's right. That was kind of the evolution. That was the sequence right there.
Because that could be argued that that was closer to a peace and love than a make love not war, but it wasn't quite all the way to the we hate war.
I think that's right. That from the 60s.
67.
67, yeah. I think I want to say from what I recall, it after when it was first released, it didn't really get a lot of traction, and then because maybe the sequence, it didn't really fit it, and then really took hold a couple years later, year or so later. But nonetheless, that's the Youngbloods. I think Gary the Berg always requests that song, doesn't he? One of the Youngbloods songs.
Yeah, it came out on the Youngbloods' debut album, The Youngbloods, in '67.
Okay. And
it didn't peak on the Billboard Top Hot 100 until 1969.
Okay.
At number 5.
How about that? All right. So I thought I recalled something to that effect, that it kind of had a sort of a long period of incubation, perhaps. On the C Spire text line, Dan in Hattiesburg says, there's a Trump guitar. I didn't know that. There's a Trump guitar? Really?
It would not surprise me.
And drums are next. Okay, I'm going to have me some Trump drums. Heck, I just got set back
who was the rocker that was known for having the gold glitter drum set? Because that's what I picked. That's what I imagine when I think of a Trump drum set.
Okay. I could see that. All the hardware would be in gold. How about that? Could you gold plate the chrome? I'm sure. That would cost you a few more coins as well. Drums are expensive.
Might as well just go with brass.
Okay. That'll work. Sharon and Brandon says, the Old Spice cologne, it's a scent, not a smell. She liked that. Oh, man. Johnny in West Point, 4547 whiskey on, you missed. What is that right next to it there? Is that a bottle, a decanter? It appears it's among the liquor on the shelf there. You missed with Trump.
I think it's 2 different whiskey bottles.
I think it is too, yeah. So how about that? All right, so tomorrow, folks, by the way, at 10:45 our time, I'm going to be on the golf course at Old Waverly, but I'll be on Newsmax from the course. I got me a hat just special for this interview. It's July 4th. I'm going to have my flag shirt on, of course. Try to set up with a big flag at Old Waverly in the background that hangs from the oak tree, the majestic oak between the clubhouse and the big lake there. On number 18, separates 18, 11, and 12. Looking forward to that. And first they said, can you come on? I said, gosh, I'm playing golf. They wanted me to come on today. I said, that's the time of our show. And then they said, how about Friday? I said, I'm going to be playing golf. What do you guys think about doing it from the golf course? They had to go check. Hey, we like that. It's July 4th. I mean, it's a perfect setting to do an interview. Randy and Starkville sent a funny show in. A funny meme in, a couple of them. It's got Joe Biden in an apron holding up a turkey. It's clearly Thanksgiving, and it says, Happy 4th of July. And right below that is a shirt with Biden in that open mouth, deer in headlights stare on his face with a Santa hat on. Happy 4th of July. Oh, my gosh. I kind of miss being able to have fun with Biden every day a little bit. It's plenty of fodder, was it not? Man, oh, man. On the C Spire text line, a compliment here. Appreciate this, as always. Thank you guys for all you do to keep us informed. I feel bad when I miss the best 3 hours of radio broadcast in this great country. Man, that's high cotton there, Rhino. We appreciate it. We appreciate you tuning in, and I certainly enjoy working with Rhino as well, and it's our honor, it's our pleasure to be with you every day across the great state of Mississippi. Hope in some way we inform you and maybe entertain you a little bit as well. That's what it's all about, man. That's what we do.
If we didn't love what we do, we wouldn't be able to put in the time and effort it takes to
totally
show prep for this.
And we're not asking for sympathy on that, but you know as well as that, the normal question, I'll check this with you, is how long do you prepare to get ready for a guest? That's the typical question, and they're always shocked when I say, I don't know what I'm going to ask them until they're sitting in that chair. And that's generally true. And I think that's how it comes across, and that's the goal, is conversational. Now, I'll admit, when I first started doing it, I'd write some questions down, and it sounded and appeared very scripted. And the audience can tell that, can they not?
Oh, yeah.
They can tell, and it's not a high-quality broadcast of radio. It's not good radio, the term that's used, the phrase to describe good versus bad in this business. But I really don't. Now, Sometimes I may have to go study the subject matter a little bit, sure, to get ready. But as far as like having a script of questions, it's not like Joe Biden who's sent the questions out to all the reporters, or his staff has, and he's sitting there with canned answers to canned questions at every dang press conference. Unlike the current president, who stops every time he makes his way from the West Wing to Marine One, there on what's called Pebble Beach, where all the press are assembled. That, by the way, that's inside the gates on the White House property. I walked right by it, was fortunate to do that when we did the show up there. First time I'd ever been that close to seeing all that. It literally is a bunch of tents set up. It's tents. It's temporary structures. They're tents. But they're there permanently. They're owned by the press that are allowed to set up right there on the west side of the big circular drive that passes right from the street through the White House. Now, I'm sure at one time there wasn't even a fence around it, right? Yeah, right. So this drive is how you got to the White House. You would turn in your neighbor's driveway and ring the doorbell, sort of deal.
What do they call the circular drive down here? Bootlegger driveway?
Oh, but he always stops, does he not? Always stops. Answers all the question, and the prior guy, oh no, we can't take any questions. It's only the president. Why would you need to ask him any questions? It's almost like the goal of you to ask the president questions. That's the feeling I got with all the protective shield of people around him. We can't have a president like that. That doesn't work. We know that now for sure.
Looks like it was Jefferson that put the first fence on the grounds of the White House.
Okay.
A wooden post and rail fence in 1801.
I was going to say, he was number 3, right?
Yeah. And over time, they added more fencing and better materials. I think it was 1830-something I saw on here where they installed the heavy wrought iron fence along Pennsylvania Avenue that people know.
That's what it is, and it is heavy. I mean, having been face-to-face with it. And remember when we went through, so you got to go through a little holding area before you get to the security area. You got to get security clearance to get to the holding area, and then you go through what is a TSA on steroids operated by the Secret Service. And these are guys with bulletproof vests and guns on their backs, by the way, which is what it should be. And I'm not sure if I shared this. I think I did, but it's been 3 months. Our engineer, Houston, as you know, accompanied me. He had to set all stuff up and make all that stuff work. And they didn't like some of the stuff in the boxes, in the cases, our equipment. And they sent him out and said, we got to let the dogs sniff it first. And poor Houston had to go on the other side of those big iron gates. So it's like I'm in jail. He's visiting, and I'm like, where are you, dude? And he's nervous, waiting for the dog. And then finally I look down the street. Here come the dogs in the Secret Service, thinking, if we get in there and I don't have Houston, we ain't doing a show. But and honestly, I'm not complaining. That's the way it should be. That is exactly how it should be. But wow, these Secret Service people, consummate professionals. Really, really good. So glad to have them protecting our president, our assets. They're great people, do a great job. Greg in Newton says there's a guy in Newton that works with girls in beauty pageants. Well, that's a whole industry, Greg. I mean, besides consultants that work with public speakers, of course. And it's not just public speakers. This individual that I hired just worked with management in general. And her specialty, which made sense because I was going to Wall Street to try to persuade people with money to write checks to invest, her specialty was persuasive speaking. That's a whole special, right, genre of speaking, if you will. Listening to Jeffrey's speech, please, for the love of all that's good, someone make the stop, says Mary Kay on the C Spire text line. It's a commercial right now, but he's still at the podium in the U.S. House of Representatives. When we come back, I got some antics that Democrats are using to block the bill. Staying with us in the Element Wealth studio.
Are we going to do this?
Middays with Gerard Gibert
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you from the Element Well studio on the C Spire text line. By the way, again, that's 601-879-4395. Ben from Madison, looking forward to the conversation with Congressman Ro Khanna. He is one of the few Democrats that hasn't gone off the deep end. Agree. And I'll tell you how this came about. I shared with you that I ran into him in a cafe just outside the Capitol in Washington, just down the street, literally. When I went to the inauguration, we were scheduled to meet up with Congressman Michael Guest to get his personal guided tour of the Capitol, which he did a fabulous job of. And he recommended this cafe before we met. And we're in there, and I recognized the congressman. He's on the Business Channel a lot. I watch the business networks more than anything. And he's on there a lot. He represents Silicon Valley, and so that's certainly relevant to the content on the Business Channel. And I recognized him and just approached him and told him what I did and extended an invitation to join the show. And he gave me his contact, gave me his personal contact info. A congressman from California to a radio talk show host in Mississippi. And I appreciate and respect that. And so reached out to him at the email address that he shared with me, thinking the time when would be good with the big, beautiful bill and everything else going on. And he agreed. So he's coming on now. We had him scheduled at a different time, but, of course, they're a little busy right now. We got that worked out. His assistant, been great to work with. Our content director, Alex Payton, she and Alex worked diligently to get this set up and had to change the time. Our great content director, Alex, is off today, most deserving. And so I received a copy of the email as well this morning and got the time worked out. So looking forward to that. I agree, Ben. Jim in the Delta says, I think Roe is a bit of a fence straddler. I've seen him expressing some of the far-left views depending on the venue he is in. It could be. I mean, that's just part of the political world, and that's fine. We're going to have a conversation, one segment, and get his thoughts on the bill. Of course, he voted against it, and we'll get him to share his concerns and also talk to him about kind of the current state of the Democrat Party. And, you know, Rhino, I feel like every Democrat, I got to ask him, just like we did Mississippi State Senator David Blunt last week, what are your thoughts about the Democrat nominee for mayor of New York? Is this the new face of the Democrat Party? Some are saying it is, and others are distancing themselves. And, you know, you can do some calculation there. If you're in a deep blue district, you're probably safe no matter what, honestly. If you're in a squishy district, just as we have Republicans that are in squishy districts that know that they could lose their seat in the next cycle based on how they vote on this bill and some other stuff, that's just the way it works in this country. So we do have lots of purple districts, if you will. They can go either way. This is why the House flips back and forth on a regular basis. The Senate's a little different. Also on the C Spire text line, Nathan in Smith County says, I hope you guys have a great and blessed 4th. Thank you for all that you do, and I hope you have a fun at the golf course and a wonderful interview. Appreciate that, Nathan. Frederick Douglass walked into the White House and sat down in the foyer because he wanted to speak with President Lincoln, says Philip in Walthall County. I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty neat. How about that? I'm thinking there wasn't any Secret Service and guard shacks out in the front to prevent him from entering at that. I don't know.
I don't think the Secret Service was even founded at that point in time, was it?
I don't know. He's a communist, Mike from Columbus says, J.D. Vance, according to J.D. Vance. I assume you're talking about the nominee for mayor. I agree, totally. We played with you yesterday, his statements from, what was it, Rhino, 21, 22. We played the clip where he says, yeah, I'm for seizing the means of production, which is...
Oh, wow, I was right, but
okay.
Just barely.
All right, about Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass met with Abraham Lincoln on August 10th, 1863. The Secret Service wasn't founded until July 5th, 1865.
Okay, interesting.
I knew they were close.
Okay, well, it makes sense. So we also got some a jobs report today, strong jobs data, but there's a little nuance to it. Most of the jobs added last month, there were 147,000, and that took unemployment at down slightly, still 4.1%. So the change in the unemployment figure went down in the hundredths of a percent. Doesn't really register. The expectation was for 110,000 additional jobs and unemployment at 4.3, so we beat that. However, it should be noted, Rhino, that most of the new jobs, this shocked me a bit, state government, not federal, state governments and health care. Otherwise, the private sector, jobs down. The job market is softening in the private sector. Federal employment down. Most of that's because of the DOGE cuts and some of the other things that have been going on since President Trump took office. So certainly interesting what's going on there. Will you ask him about salt, says Thomas in Greenwood. I intend to. Appreciate that, Thomas. We're stepping aside for a break. It is time for Fox News and SuperTalk News. Again, when we return, it's California Congressman Ro Khanna. Stay with us. Your of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. Hour 2 of the program on this
Fireworks Eve.
So, literally on the break, folks. Sorry to report, got an email from Congressman Ro Khanna's assistant, and it looks like the voting schedule is changing on the House floor there, so he will be unable to join us at this moment. And she told me, I'll get back to you ASAP with a new time. And I don't know if that means today, but he's going to come on. It may not be today. I'm a little disappointed. It's kind of one of those things where the timing is both good and bad. It's good in that this is just fresh. This is big news. The big, beautiful bill on the floor of the body of which he's a member. It's also bad in that he's a member of the body, so he's got to do his duty for his constituents, and I respect and appreciate that. So we're standing by to see what happens there, but we'll get him on. Look, they've been nothing but great to work with, and again, he and I probably don't align on too many of the issues, and philosophically, although he's not the radicals that he's not among that group, that core in the U.S. House for sure. I wouldn't put him in that category, and in fact, it wouldn't be in his best interest to do so, to sort of align with him, given his constituency. So it turns out that a lot of the folks in the Silicon Valley appreciate the big, beautiful bill because the tax provisions. You think about the estate tax exemption, for example, and continuing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, making it permanent, and how that affects income taxes, capital gains, all the above. It's important to people that are very high income folks, such as the case in Congressman Khanna's district. It's a very affluent, very wealthy district, and they want to keep their money. They're waking up. You're seeing the young folks that sometimes put their leftist ideology at the top of the list are now saying, wait a second, you're getting a little deep in my pocket here. You agree, Rhino? You're seeing a shift in that attitude. I'm so sick of this argument from the left that the Medicaid cuts are and SNAP cuts, those are the two main focuses of the bill from a reforms perspective on spending, because a reconciliation bill can only address mandatory spending. You can create a framework for discretionary spending, but that's still got to be appropriated every year. Once this bill goes through, you're enacting law that changes mandatory spending programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP, which are included in this legislation. There are reforms that we've discussed. But this idea that, oh, we're doing that to give tax breaks to the billionaires is insanity. First, I've got to tell you, I don't even subscribe to the notion of tax breaks. Here's what I mean by that. That assumes that all wealth and income emanates from government. And that anything you're allowed to keep, I don't care if you make $10,000 a year, $1 million, or you're a billionaire, that whatever you keep, that's a tax break. When is it not described as a tax break?
Well, that's the problem, is they understand it enough to wordsmith it to hell and back. And you know they understand the numbers because they always say tax the rich, tax the 1%, make them pay their fair share, but they never set the threshold at the actual 1%.
That's so true.
They never set the cutoff for the actual rich people. They set the cutoff about halfway through the middle class.
Well, and we're at a point now because our tax structure is so progressive, the most progressive of all the countries on the planet, that we're honestly shifting even more of the burden to what amounts to a handful of households in this country. And that's a dangerous scenario. When you look at the amount the 1% pays to the Treasury, nearly half of the dang tax burden, and you look at the number of the households of the total number, we're relying on just a few thousand households in the country to fund the government.
I mean, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm fairly certain the top 1% is bumping up against $800,000 a year.
Yeah,
I don't think it's quite $800,000, but just as a nice big round number, because their suggested cutoff for, it's not going to tax anybody that makes under $400,000.
Yeah, which is
so you got to make double what their cutoff was to even get to the 1% that they say they need to tax. Because they know deep down, if they taxed them as much as they wanted to, they still wouldn't have enough for what they spend.
787, close to $800K. That's right, to be in the top 1%. 787. So, but when you look again at the number of people that, their household at least, that fits into that category that puts them in the top 1%, I actually did the research on that. I got the data straight from the IRS's website. It takes a little time, but you can dig through it, pour through it, and figure it out. I just know I got a little shocked at the fact that, wait, that's a small number of people in households, relatively speaking. Let's see here. I'm looking at it right now. The number, 1.5 million returns are of earners in the top 1%. The total number of returns, 153 million. So you're talking about 1.5 million taxpayers are providing half of the revenue to support 340 million people. But that is never good enough. But this idea that the two are linked, that Medicaid cuts are necessary to give tax breaks. Well, I hereby, from this point forward, declare we don't even talk about tax breaks. I don't acknowledge there is such a thing. How about earnings retained? How about that? It's not a tax break. Oh, you're letting me keep more of what I earned. Wow, thank you, government. May I have another? That's how we've gotten. We've created a society that feels like they're entitled to the work product of others. Because that's what it is. It's exactly what it is. It's just wrong. And this fomenting of class envy, why don't you go spend some time making money instead of sulking about what other people have and obsessing with it? The world is your oyster. We shared the other day. This country minted 1,000 new millionaires a day. Unprecedented in our history. And that was under Biden. Imagine what it's going to be now. Because we got three big pillars going on, I think, that are going to drive economic growth. This bill that's about to pass is one of those. massive deregulation, unleashing American energy and really the animal spirits of American capitalists. And you got a reckoning of and a wrecking ball being put to our trade policies. And the other thing you can't discount is world peace. Stability in these powder keg regions is huge towards economic growth and prosperity. Huge. I just want to say to Iran, hey, why don't you go back to the 70s when your people were a lot wealthier and happier and we actually had a trading relationship? Imagine what could be done. You got a bunch of assets at your disposal, but you're squandering them because you're into this radical Muslim crap. I don't mean the Muslim religion, the peaceful aspect. I mean the radicals that have taken over, that are more about killing Americans and Jews than spreading peace.
All because Iran learned in the mid to late 80s that they don't have the military capability to go toe-to-toe with the U.S., so in order to inflict the most damage on the U.S., they funnel money to terrorists,
so true,
to non-state entities that don't have to obey and abide by the rules of war.
So when we talked yesterday about at least my discuss with those who are calling for the cancellation of July 4th, and they're not proud of their country, and we're really not free, and really not this, really, I mean, it's so much focus on what they don't have. Think about
you ask
this.
a single one of them what they can't do today that they could do a year ago, they can't answer it.
Can't answer it. Because you've seen it. You've seen reporters ask them that, and they get flustered.
Because it's all childish hyperbole.
Totally. So, did you guys know that a couple of weeks ago, June 22nd, 23 Christians in Syria were murdered by radical Muslims in a suicide bombing for practicing their freedom to worship Christ? That's what it's like in other countries. These are the same people that are saying they're not free here that support this kind of garbage.
And that's after a Syrian regime change where the regime said it's okay for you to have other religions.
That's exactly right. Coming right back from the Element Wealth Studio.
Hey, this is Bob, and if you're
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so awesome.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Ah, yes, old Ziggy Stardust himself, the great David Bowie, Heroes. Appreciate that. My favorite Bowie song right there. So the Dow's still in the green at 324. It's come down a little bit from being north of 400 earlier in the day. The NASDAQ also up nicely at 210. The markets like the prospect of the big, beautiful bill going through. The Vietnam trade deal, the Treasury Secretary says there's a lot more of that coming. Expected a flurry of trade deals, is what he said earlier this morning. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. The jobs report, all the above are just powering markets forward. Looks good in the green. Crude oil down 50 cents. And the funny money is up too, man. It's doing pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Bumping up against 110.
Yeah, 1.9 and change last I checked. So that's good.
Which is up near the all-time high set back in May of 111.
Yeah, exactly. I know it got close to 112, as I recall. It's the all-time high. So all good news. Now, on the C Spire text line, I present you a tweet for the day. Can you take too much Adderall? Asking for Hakeem Jeffrey. Man, he's up there. Still is. Let's see here. On the 601 C Spire text line, let me see. Medicare reform and requiring able-bodied men to work equal cuts. This is crazy and illogical. Ask Rokan about that. Yeah, we were going to dig into it. Hopefully we can get the congressman on. If not today, I'm confident he's going to come on. And we suggested, if not another time during the show today, perhaps on Monday. So we've got a working relationship now with his office. That's the main thing, and I think we're good to go. Open up federal land to oil drilling. That's already happened. That really won't. I mean, that will certainly help as far as generating revenue for the Treasury. I'm not quite as optimistic about that really influencing. Medicare needs to be reformed yesterday. I'm not exactly sure. What do you mean? What specific? But here's the last statement this person made on 601. Leave the U.S. if you are unhappy with our country. We got some sound we're going to play here. Rhino, hit it.
My daddy worked hard, and so have I. We paid our taxes and gave our lives to serve this great country. So what are they complaining about? Yeah, we love our families, we love our kids. You know it's love that makes us all so rich. That's where we're at. If they don't like it, they can just get the hell out. Yeah. My hair's turned.
That's Leonard Skinner. Get the hell out if you don't like it. I'm pleased to report that is among the set list for the house band. I've been practicing the drums on that. When you saw me air drumming it there, I've got those licks down. It's pretty cool, honestly. That little instrumental segue vocal riff right there, pretty neat. So, yeah, just get the hell out if you don't like it. It's just simple as that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not free to redress our government and be critical. But there comes a time when you got to take some stock in the positive aspects. It's just negative all the time.
Well, if you've convinced yourself, like the member of the squad that says we're the worst country in the world, why would you want to live in the worst country in the world?
Yeah, that was Ilhan Omar, right, that said that.
Oh, yeah.
A sitting member of the United States House of Representatives. I can't even reconcile that. What a privilege it is to represent 800,000 people in your district in the U.S. House, a body of 435, and you're complaining about it? You got to be kidding me.
Especially considering her home country of Somalia.
Right.
In comparison.
Right. Exactly. So some of the antics, though, that have been performed by the Democrats in opposition. Eric Swalwell. I was waiting for you to say that guy.
He's not even worthy of that. How's Fang Fang doing, Eric?
Exactly. Well, he uploaded a number of videos that incorporated profanity. What's up with these people in this profanity? Can they not have a conversation without it?
They're trying to get the youth vote back. They're trying to, quote-unquote, look cool.
That makes you look cool? The youth likes that?
I think they do. That's what a 13-year-old, 14-year-old would think is cool. I said a dirty word.
13, 14.
I'm so edgy.
Got it.
But that's the mental age of the vast majority of bleeding heart, blowhard liberals.
So he
They're
referred...
stuck in perpetual pubescence.
It's so ridiculous. He posted a video where he said this legislation is a big bull. I'll let you fill in the rest of the word. Bill. One of the videos launched with just a random person asking Congressman Eric Swalwell. It pains me to put Congressman in front of his name, but I respect the office in this country, and I'm going to do it. He doesn't deserve it. What the F is up with Vice President J.D. Vance? That was the question of Swalwell. So I sent to Rhino a video that features 4 physicians. Well, at least they claim to be physicians. They got white coats on. And they're in the Capitol. It looks like in the Capitol, right? They're opposing the bill, and they're holding a sign. Democrat doctors. I can't read the rest of
Caucus.
it. What's that?
Democratic Doctors Caucus.
Okay, got it. So these are members of Congress, apparently, who are Democrats and doctors. Is that right? Is that the caucus?
No, it's doctors that vote Democrat have formed their own caucus to try to influence Congress.
Okay. So not actually members. I was
They've
going
been
to say
around longer than the PAC system.
Okay. Well, I didn't recognize them, so I wondered.
Pretty ineffectual.
Well, the big thing is they're holding this up, and it looks like there's 5. I see one in the background. And they're reading.
They're technically holding a press conference, but
in the Capitol,
nobody's paying attention.
That's the point. There's just, you can see between the camera and this group are just a whole bunch of people moving about. Tourists. That's exactly, you can tell. These aren't members of Congress. It's families and so forth getting a tour of the Capitol. They ain't paying attention to these antics, but that's what they're doing. And then, of course, you showed me yesterday a photo of Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries posing with a baseball bat on Instagram, writing in the social media post that House Democrats will keep the pressure on Trump's one big ugly bill. Oh, my gosh.
It looks like a Little League baseball card.
It does. And some people actually said, who thought this photo was a good idea? Another wrote, this ain't it, bro. North Carolina Rep. Virginia Fox called the post low energy. Oh, my God. He is kind of a low energy guy.
Well, it's not even a well-taken photo because it obviously was taken by someone who ascribes from if you get the camera higher, you look slimmer. Because if you're trying to be intimidating, the photographer should be lower than the eye level of the individual.
That's true. So, and of course, you showed me a video yesterday. We have to be fair and balanced here. No, we actually don't have to be, but we try to be at least consistent. I didn't think the little charade being played out by Representative Nancy Mace was a big hit either. Would you please explain to the folks what you showed me yesterday?
Yeah, she had a selectively edited video of her stopping at a gas station and putting money in the jukebox and getting a Red Bull in her PJs. And then I found the other videos where it's like, no, she was looking like, we're road tripping to D.C. because we can't get a flight due to the weather. And then you find out, no, you're not really road tripping. You're riding in one of those party Sprinter vans with the big screen in the back.
And your production crew in tow to capture you in your damn pajamas.
At least she put a bra on when she got to the Capitol.
She doesn't
it was
always
evident she wasn't wearing one in the gas station.
Hasn't it been rumored of her suiting up to run for governor, I believe, of the great state of South Carolina?
She certainly has higher political aspirations.
I think
don't
that's
know
true.
if it's attainable, but she has the aspirations.
So it's just political grandstanding on steroids with all this stuff going on. NVIDIA, I'm going to pivot a bit. I found this to be some interesting information. They're on track to become the world's most valuable company in history today. In fact, I think they just achieved that. Market cap of $3.92 trillion. A lot of optimism on Wall Street about artificial intelligence. And their stock was up 2.2% this morning. They're at 3.92, I think, presently. And that eclipsed Apple's record close back in December of 24 of close to it, 3.9. But on the other side of the break, I'm going to share with you some interesting comparative data about NVIDIA's market cap that might shock you a little bit, but what it will show is that this country is the place for business. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
That's Jeff Porcaro on the drums for Toto there. Man, was he ever a good drummer. Good grief. And you know, He's one of those versatile drummers that played on a bunch of music you don't even know that he was the drummer on. One of those guys. Of course, all those guys, I believe, came from like a studio music background and came together to form such a great band. I remember when they ran away with all the Grammys, like in 83 or 82, something like that. And they kept winning, but that was their big album that had so many great hits on it, including...
Yeah, they got 4 in 83.
That's what I remember.
Album, record, producer for a non-classical, and pop performance by a duo or a group.
Well-deserved. Pretty strong, huh? No doubt. Of course, still touring today. Jeff Porcaro, the drummer, passed away several years ago. So did his brother, the bass player, as well. But still touring today. Fantastic. Steve Lukather, lead vocals and lead guitar. Still a great musician. So, on the C Spire text line as well, just looking at...
We had a suggestion from the 601.
Yeah.
Let's put the equivalent of alligator Alcatraz in every state. I've already got a name if we do it in Mississippi.
What's that?
Catfish Cooler.
I love it. I can dig it. I mean, I think that's
Mosquito
perfect.
Supermax, but I like Catfish Cooler better.
I think that's perfect. So I was talking about NVIDIA before we went to break, and, of course, they're breaking through right now. I hadn't checked it. Stocks was up when I checked it a minute ago, and it's propelling them to be the world's most valuable company at this point in time, knocking on the door of passing Apple when it hit that milestone as the world's most valuable company. But its net worth, get this, Rhino, is now more than the combined value of the Canadian and Mexican stock markets. Exceeds the total value of all publicly listed companies in the UK. Is there any doubt that only in America is that sort of wealth creation possible? And why is that company so valuable? Because we're all using their stuff. We're all getting value from it in ways you don't even know, right? We don't even know often we're using it. But this is fantastic. I mean, I love seeing stuff like this. It just gives me so much faith and confidence and such a good, warm, fuzzy feeling about our country. And getting government out of the way, as this administration and Congress are about to do, and especially with a big, beautiful bill, I think we're going to see new heights for our economy. I'm not as quite as optimistic, I'll admit, as members are about the amount of revenue this will generate for the Treasury, simply because the stark contrast between the Obama-era tax environment and when the first round of Trump tax cuts passed. No doubt, you knew that. Despite what the CBO, of course, their hands are tied in the way they calculate that stuff. But the Democrats went crazy. This is going to blow a hole in the budget. Since when have they ever worried about the budget? They only worry about it from the spending side. From the revenue side. They don't care about it on the spending side. They don't sit around and say, geez, I don't think we can enact that new program, that new benefit, because we ain't got the money. That never comes up. It's not like you have to do in your household. Gee, we just can't afford that, honey. I'm sorry. Kids, whatever. Even in an individual household, we all have to make those tough decisions. But not our government. That never enters the equation. That's what bugs me about it. So this is really cool, but exceeding the value of the combined Mexican and Canadian stock markets, I never really thought about it in those terms, but there's an organization that tracks that sort of stuff and analyzes it, reports on it. I just find it fascinating.
It's a great way to contextualize large numbers when you get into the trillions of dollars. It's just kind of hard to wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a story I heard in business school, forever ago now, about Japan and their real estate market in the late 80s and early 90s because of their economic success and economic boom they were experiencing. In the late 80s and early 90s, Japan's real estate, the totality of Japan's real estate, was worth more on paper than the entirety of United States real estate.
Yeah.
all of the land and buildings in America on paper were worth less than all of the land and buildings in Japan in the late 80s, early 90s.
Unbelievable. I could be more optimistic.
Because if you're just looking at the numbers, it's a whole bunch of really big numbers. But then when you craft that narrative around it to explain it, it's like, whoa.
Yes. And yesterday, just while we're talking about big numbers, I think I shared with you, Oracle announced they've got a new cloud contract, new cloud services. They've got their Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI. It's top-notch, by the way. And Oracle, of course, they got their start as a database company. They're really the ones who kind of made mainstream the technology known as relational databases. Larry Ellison, the founder, now the second richest person in the country as a result of Oracle's stock really going through the roof on the heels of announcements. So they just announced a single cloud services contract, $30 billion a year. One contract, $2.5 billion a month for cloud services. That's just unbelievable. I love it. It's fantastic. It just shows you how this sort of technology is powering our economy. And customers are receiving enormous value from those services and moving these workloads into cloud environments such as Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Robin Laurel says 50% plus one wins an election. I've never seen a politician get 100% in any election or passing of bills as they are. So why is there not more an effort to get the 50% plus one? I assume you're talking about the filibuster, Rob. So little history on that. The founders actually believed that the Senate should be what they referred to as the cooling saucer for those crazy people in the House. And so this idea of a supermajority, it actually has its roots in that philosophy. And it could change. Look, there's no doubt. Republicans today, if they could get 51 votes or 50 votes plus the vice president, they could end the filibuster and pass their entire agenda with a simple majority. Now, they're doing that, by the way, with this reconciliation bill. That's why it goes through the reconciliation process, because bills that pass that muster and that scrutiny by the parliamentarian are allowed to pass with 50 plus 1. That's why you're limited on other things you can do unless you can get to the 60-vote threshold. I give you an example. The terrible Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill both required 60 votes to pass. Well, Democrats were in control. How'd they do it? They got numerous Republicans, I think 15, 17 to join in. Unfortunately, one of those was our Senator Roger Wicker. I've been critical of the senator's vote. No secret there on that particular bill. He joined in with Mitch McConnell, a host of other senators, many of whom are no longer in the Senate. Right? They didn't run for re-election. They were terming out. This has always been my concern with term limits. I just do whatever the heck I want to do. I'm not running for re-election.
And that's the point I was going to make about the cooling saucer of the Senate. It kind of lost that ability, and it happened more recently than the sinking of the Titanic, because it was the 17th Amendment that changed the system to where we vote for senators instead of them being appointed.
Popular vote.
And because you vote for them, even though there's a longer term, you still have those risks of, well, if I'm leaving, I'll just go scorched earth, or I've got to do this in order to ensure re-election.
Yeah, totally agree. So the thing to keep in mind, Rob, is that had Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin not stood in the gap and prevented Democrats from ending the filibuster when Biden was president and they had the House and the Senate. But remember, the Senate was 50-50 with the vice president casting the tie-breaking vote as necessary. Kamala Harris, oh, geez. So remember that they wanted to end the filibuster. But Sinema, mainly it was Manchin, that said, nope, this is the way we do things. I'm not going to do it.
There's actually tweets coming up of Hakeem Jeffries railing against the filibuster at that time period, which is a bit ironic considering what he's still doing.
Such hypocrites. Yes, he's filibustering. He's like in hour 7 right now. Although he really can't. It doesn't have the stroke that it does in the Senate, as you know. It's not a procedural matter. It's just useless delay is really what it is. It's just makes everybody miserable. But had they done that, and I've talked about this before on the show, and when I speak, I discuss this. This laundry list agenda that the Democrats had they ended the filibuster, oh my gosh. D.C. would be a state, Puerto Rico would be a state, and we'd never have the Senate again. Abortion, the right to, would be codified. The federal government would take over elections. DEI would be the law of the land. Taxes would be crazy higher right now, or the last 4 years. There's a long list of bad stuff that would have happened. Borders wide open.
You thought Jimmy Carter was bad.
And that was their agenda, but the filibuster protected it. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Polyumpa, Mississippi.
Come on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back with you in the Element Well studio. We appreciate you joining us as always. So let's see, there's a question on the C Spire text line. When will no tax on overtime and tips take effect if passed? Yeah, it would actually, right, I want to say it maybe goes into effect this year. Let me check that out. I think it is like retroactive. Now, I know it went back and forth. And so I don't know where it landed. I'm looking it up right now. Let's see.
If it does 25. Pass, it'll be 25 through 28.
Yeah, so that was the point I was going to make, guys. This is not permanent. This is temporary. So 4 years. That's it. And by the way,
limited.
Right, that's the other thing I was going to point out. Again, the distinction between an exemption and a deduction. It's a deduction, not an exemption. And the main difference is that income which is exempt means that it is also exempt from so-called payroll taxes, Social Security and Medicare, FICA. Overtime and tip income is still subject to those taxes. So you're still going to see it on your paycheck. You're going to see those payroll taxes withheld. And if you want to, it's
state
a deduction.
Tax will still be withheld.
That's right. State taxes still will be because we have state income tax that doesn't apply there. So what's called a reconciling item between the state and the federal government. I'm going to recommend, by the way, the legislature to fix that, just like they did with the immediate. Remember that expensing provision, which was what we call a reconciling item between federal and state. It just makes your tax return more complicated, more than anything else. But the other thing is, because this is a deduction, it's still treated as taxable income, even for income taxes, by your employer. So, guys, if you want, because you know you're going to deduct it when you do your tax return, and that will figure into your total taxes owed, if you want to change that so that that's baked into your take-home pay, your net pay now, you need to talk to your employer about changing your exemptions or your additional deductions and stuff like that, just so you don't have this big – you may want the big refund. I don't know, but – I don't want the government using my money. I try to make that as close as possible. Now, the other thing to keep in mind on the overtime, and by the way, the limitation is $12,500 on overtime. On tips, it's $12,500 up to $25,000. Yeah, $25,000.
It's $12,500 for individuals. For
individuals, $25,000 for married, right? Jointly. And there's an income cutoff: $150,000 for individuals, $300,000 on married couples. So after that, there's a phase out of it, essentially. But here's the important key thing to keep in mind about overtime. Only the premium portion. So if you work time and a half and you get paid time and a half for overtime, the time portion, if you will, is still subject fully to income taxes. Only the half, the premium. It's not all overtime pay. It's just a premium portion of the overtime. So there's some caveats is the point. It's limited based on your income. There's an amount, a threshold that is deductible. It's a deduction, not an exemption, and it terminates at the end of 28. So that's the only way you can make the sausage work, to pass it with 50 votes. So all that figures in to the math. That's expected to cost, of course, the Treasury money. You look at it over a 10-year period, you're talking as much as on an annual basis, you're talking about $15-20 billion a year to the Treasury. And the same with, I think the tips may be a little bit more than the overtime. Because, in the research I've done, Rhino, not a lot of people work overtime anymore. The idea and the hope, I think, is more people would work it if it's subject to less income tax. They would be more willing to work after hours and earn that overtime pay. There was another provision that got adjusted that's a big thing that people are unhappy about by the parliamentarian in the Senate, and it concerns Medicaid, and it has to do with this provider tax stuff. So what the bill said was, okay, this provider tax is where states levy taxes on medical providers that collect money from them. They use that money then to go get more Medicaid dollars, is the way it works, from the federal government. And the parliamentarian said that doesn't really comply with the rules, and said that you can opt out. A state can actually opt out. So it also phases out at a much slower rate. The opt-out is kind of a weird deal. I don't know that that's going to pass as is. I think that may have got a little adjustment in the House. But if we haven't expanded Medicaid, which is the case here in Mississippi, then it really doesn't affect. It's only expansion states. That's because so many more people have been added to Medicaid. It's cost the federal government a lot more money, and the states are using providers to get more money to cover the state's portion, to get more from the federal. It's kind of a scheme. We're taking a break right now. Fox News, SuperTalk News. Mississippi State Senator Nicole Boyd is next.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Friday Eve.
Just a quick update before we dig into our conversation with Senator Akins-Boyd is that the opt-out that I was talking about, so that's not in the bill with respect to the Medicaid provider payment provision. That did survive, except that only applies to expansion states. Originally, it was going to apply to all states, and then it got kind of watered down, only applies to expansion states. So it won't affect the state of Mississippi, and this is just when states levy taxes on medical providers to help defray the state cost of Medicaid that allows them to tap more Medicaid dollars. Here's what did stay in as an option just to pass on, and we'll get to it later on in the program. If not, we'll get to it next week. And that's a tax credit for contributions to school vouchers. Federal tax credits, not state tax credits. It's not a state program, it's a federal program. If you contribute to a private organization that then provides scholarships, if you will, to students to attend private school, you get some tax relief. States can opt out of that. That was the latest provision. States can opt out of that. This is interesting. And the idea was, the explanation I'm reading is that many of the blue states, but unfortunately Mississippi is among those as a red state, do not have provisions for education savings accounts that allow students to pick a private school as an alternative to a public school and have their state funding follow them. something we've tried to get through here in Mississippi, but has not been able to make it across the finish line. So, and I'm reading specifically what the explanation is. This allows states to opt out now, offering an escape for blue states that do not support using public funds for private education. So I just want to pass that out. That's a new kind of nuance to that provision, because the Parents Campaign Center, you've probably seen in Mississippi, was urging Mississippians to call their senators before the Senate passed the bill and say, vote against this thing.
Right.
So originally it looked like it was taken out. It got reinserted with the opt-out provision, and that's how it stands right now. I just want to pass that on to clarify for our audience that the Medicaid stuff, no opt-out, it specifically refers to this. All right, we got Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd. She represents Panola and Lafayette counties. What are the committees you're on or chairing these days?
So I chair universities and colleges.
Yeah.
I'm vice chair of Medicaid.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, and so and then kind of chair the Women, Children's, and Family Study Committee, as it's called.
That's right.
So yeah.
So let's talk first about 25 session. There was some rather significant legislation that flowed through your committee, and that's this sort of anti-DEI bill. You and I talked about that offline some as well. That went into effect, right?
It did.
July 1. Tell us about that.
So that went into effect at our universities and community colleges. They all have adopted policies, and at our K-12 institutions across the state. So all of those adopted policies, it is in litigation right now. The state has been sued over that. And we expected that.
Yeah.
I mean, and they've been sued across the country when these have gone into a place.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been from a lot of the individuals who are implementing it. You've seen some pushback, but not to what maybe you would have thought.
Okay.
It has actually been embraced by some. Because a lot of the provisions that we have in that bill are provisions that the Supreme Court had said that we needed to do. It's also a bill that they have found that a lot of the policies and procedures that had been done in the past actually did not do what they intended to do. There was kind of a backlash with some of the things that were implemented. So I haven't seen and I haven't heard from a lot of individuals, but except those that are suing right now. And
so a little remorse on that, perhaps, huh?
Well, I think we have a good bill. We have a good, strong
No, I'm talking
bill.
about the university center. That wasn't exactly what we had in mind. It kind of took a life of its own, and they maybe have some remorse about the initial implementation of those
too,
policies.
When you're a professor and you're sitting in a training session that is being done maybe by a national institute that's come in, and you've got to go through this for your accreditation purposes, and they are requiring you to adhere to things that you don't personally agree with, that you don't agree with, and really not your religious beliefs, or really you just don't believe is practical.
Sure.
I think that's a difficult position to put these professors in.
Yeah.
So I think that by putting these provisions in there, we protected those professors, and then their students as well. I've had graduate students who said, I've had to go to training classes that I don't agree with this, and I don't think the practical applications are the right thing.
Yeah.
So I think these are good things. I think that we tried to set a level playing field where there would not be any bias towards any type of ideology. So I think we were trying to really let people teach the subjects they need to teach in a way that is not political.
Yeah. So needed, so necessary. And, of course, the president, he issued a series of executive orders kind of revoking what the prior president had done that required and mandated all that throughout government.
Exactly. So I'm anxious to see what the courts say. We will look at it. We will work with all of this. Nationally, most of these have been upheld. And so they've been challenged and they've been upheld in most of the places because it really does try to level a playing field for just people to teach their core subject matters.
I suspect it's a bit of a relief for many that's what they want to do. That's what they signed up to do, to teach in higher ed, essentially.
Well, and I've heard from a lot of higher ed professors, especially living in a college community, that they are pleased.
Okay.
They just want to teach.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Well, that makes total sense. I mean, there was some other laws that went into effect as well. We might get to those in a minute, but let's talk about this opioid settlement and explain that to the folks where we are on that.
So Mississippi, most people are aware, did an opioid settlement with there's been really 5 major settlements with the lawsuit with the opioid companies. And so it has resulted in settlements with these companies. We in Mississippi are set to receive about $410 million total from these opioid settlements.
Okay.
And the court requires you to develop a process of how you're going to spend these monies to make sure that you adhere to the terms of the settlement. And so what the Mississippi legislature did, and we'll be looking at about $259 million of that money. So what we did is we want to make sure that what we do, is effective. We wanted to provide some transparency and accountability with these dollars to the public. And we also wanted to gather the experts at the table. And so we've put together a process. Some of the other states have kind of put a similar process in place where we have an advisory committee that will be vetting all the proposals that we'll be looking to fund in the legislature.
Okay.
And they'll be making sure that they comply with the terms of the settlement. And then hopefully they'll be giving us what they believe the priorities should be in expending in these areas. Because our opioid crisis, we know, affects every aspect of life in Mississippi. Yeah. It affects our judiciary system, obviously. It affects our criminal, all of our correction system. But it also affects a lot of families and CPS.
And our economy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It affects the workforce. So there are so many different areas where interventions are needed kind of in this area. And Mississippi, we've been really trying to fight this in a number of ways, but this is going to give us a lot more tools to do this. Mississippi we've put naloxone out there to try to treat when you have an overdose. Our local first responders are doing a great job at that. The Attorney General has really done a great job with her One Pill Can Kill, really getting that information out to young people, particularly on those college campuses. But when you talk to our first responders every day, they say, we've got to do more and more, and especially when you talk to our local law enforcement.
Okay.
So I'm excited for that committee to get up and going. We've got a great committee. There's been some great appointments to that. It's people who have expertise in all different areas. It's people whose families have been affected by this in a very personal way. So I look forward to this committee working and really doing some great work for the state.
What are you hearing about that didn't get a lot of attention, but it's something that's starting to get so because it's gone into effect, the panhandling license you got to have and setting up tents. I can't remember exactly the words. But, encampments, that's right. So we got a break. We'll come back. We'll keep talking. We got Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd in the Element Wealth studio coming right back.
This is Bob, just
covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert, Middays with Gerard, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. We are in the Element Wealth studio. It's Middays. We're visiting with Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd from Lafayette and Panola counties. Okay, so let's finish up on the panhandler and the encampment bills, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe them.
Well, most people remember Giuliani. Before he came into office, New York was horrific.
Yeah.
They had panhandlers on every corner. There was a lot of stuff going on. And so they had a crime rate and all that. And they put a significant effort into looking at panhandling, encampments, all of those things. And what they saw is that was kind of indicative of a change that could be occurring. And so when they got control of those things, they started seeing decreases in crime. And so there's been a lot of studies written up about this. And so it's been kind of interesting to me that we've gotten a little bit of criticism, not a little bit of criticism, quite a bit, about requiring now that we get rid of the panhandlers. And I will tell you, going through many of these intersections in this city, as I'm down here so much, these are dangerous.
It's a problem.
It's a problem. And when they're coming up, banging on your windows, you're afraid to move your car because you don't want to hit these individuals. This is a problem. And it also is a bad look for our capital city.
Yep.
So, I understand people's concern for people and want to help people, but go help them in other ways. But this is a safety issue. It's a public safety issue. They are going to get hurt. And so we need to get these people off the streets from panhandling. It's not a good thing.
It's surprising we already haven't had some sort of serious accident.
Yes. And there's certain intersections that you go through in this community that you know that you've got to be totally head on a swivel because you may hit someone. So this is a practical thing, and I think everybody needs to realize it. There's plenty of evidence from places all over the country who've done things like this and really kind of helped clean up their cities from a lot. And this is a place to start. So I think this was a great bill. Representative Yates really pushed it. I know. And then the encampment bill, my colleague Chad McMahon pushed this from Tupelo. And so you are seeing these issues all across the state of Mississippi.
Yep.
And so this is a proactive thing we can do. And all we're really doing is we're putting this in the power of municipalities to handle this.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we need to be doing.
Sure. Makes sense.
So let the locals look at it.
Let's pivot to the big, beautiful bill. I'm looking here on the screen. Representative Hakeem Jeffries still at the podium. He's in about hour 8 now, isn't he, Rhino, I believe?
Not quite that bad. I think it's hour 5.
He's been doing it pardon me. But he may not be going away for a while. Maxine Waters is flanking him to his left. So all eyes have been on this, Senator, because we in all the states received lots of money from the federal government, and this could affect our budget. How do you feel at this point?
Well, right now, I've been, obviously as Vice Chair for Medicaid, I've been paying a lot of attention to this, and you've had some people on already that kind of discuss kind of the implications of this. But the other thing I'm really paying a lot of attention to as Chair of Universities and Colleges is what this means for the state of Mississippi. There's going to be changes to Pell Grants. We have about 45%.
That's a big thing too, man.
It's a huge thing. And so we have about 45% of our students in Mississippi, whether you be at community college or at IHL, that are on Pell Grants. So what are the changes that we're going to see in that arena? And so that's going to roughly affect around 70 to 80,000 Mississippians.
So my understanding is there'll be some either limits or maybe total restrictions on part-time students, right? That's the big thing I'm hearing people talk about.
Well, so there's different. So the House and the Senate obviously have different versions of this. And so in the Senate version, someone would be limited to a lifetime cap of 100 to 200,000, depending on if you're just an undergraduate or a graduate student. There's also some limitations on parent plus loan limits. Both of them put limitations on the limits that a parent can take out for these children through these loan programs, where they've kind of been unlimited before. They're going to put The House has a $50,000 per parent limit. The Senate version has a $65,000 per thousand limit. And so there's also the structure of the loan payments. They're looking at changing very much. The House version put a 15 credit that you had to be taking at least 15 credits.
Which puts you almost as a full-time student.
It puts you as a full-time student. The Senate version did not do that.
They didn't do that, right.
The Senate version didn't do that.
That was a big concern.
Well, and that's a big concern we have a lot of Mississippians who have a little bit of college and not a lot of college.
Right.
Have not finished that terminal degree.
Yep.
And we need those individuals to go back and get those degrees because to maximize their revenue that they can make in the workforce.
We also have a lot that are enrolled in our community colleges that are working.
Exactly.
And thus there's part-time students, and they would be no longer eligible.
Yes, so I was very pleased to see the
Senate change that.
Make those changes with that. Particularly, we have a lot of single mothers.
Yep.
And we know, I'd say it every time I come in here, but we know that single mother labor force participation rate is 20% higher than our general population. And those women out there are trying to get more education so they can increase their earning potential for their families. So I think that's really important. It also looks at endowment taxes for very large endowments.
Yeah.
We don't have endowments in Mississippi that are reaching those levels yet that we're really worried about those huge taxes on that. The other thing too is there's a credentialing Pell Access for the Workforce and Trades program, and this is something I really like in here, is really making sure that those that want to get short-term credentials are eligible for some Pell supplement with that. So I think you'll see, if that comes into place too, I think you'll see the amount of these short-term credentials really being increased from our community colleges and even our IHL institutions, if they're able to offer that. And that really does help upskill our workforce in Mississippi. And that's really what our workforce needs in Mississippi. We need that upskilling. And so those are some things that we can do with that. They also have some interesting things on accountability.
Okay.
Really looking at telling universities that you've got to make sure that the degrees that you're offering the students are of value.
Do you have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, me either.
I think it's going to, now I think it may bring some challenges for some of the state, particularly. I was looking at this and trying to go, okay, our social workers who we need, not just in our CPS system, but we have them in hospitals and nursing homes, and we have them in many places across the state, but they're not high wage earners, and they're not high wage jobs. And so that's going to require the marketplace to make sure that those salaries are conducive on degrees like that. So there's going to be some implementations with that. But I really do think it's going to push everybody with all these changes that are being made is to being smart consumers.
Okay.
Own their college dollars.
Should be.
And they should be. So I have a daughter who looked at all of her options when she was headed to college, and she had offers at maybe more name brand, higher private institutions, and she chose a public institution because it was her scholarship basically covered all of it, and so she covered that, and she said, I don't want to graduate. I don't want to be in debt. I don't want to have loans. And so that was, something that she really made a smart decision and looked at those decisions. And I think everybody needs to be doing that.
Yeah.
So people talk about graduating undergraduate with all these hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And you're like, okay, where did you go to college? Because you can go here and get the degrees you need. And then if you want to go to graduate school and all of that, you would be in much better position to incur that debt.
Well, and they unfortunately they know they got lots of financial aid available from the federal government, which is just lapping onto our debt, unfortunately.
Exactly. So I think these are things that there's going to be some changes. I'm concerned about some of the changes and what it can do to our students.
Yeah.
But I also to understand the general policies behind it and how we move forward with that.
We didn't get to Medicaid. Can you hang around?
I can't.
Okay, we'll get to that next because you're on the committee, vice chair of the committee, right? So it's a big part. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the LMOL studio. We're visiting with Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd from Oxford, represents Lafayette and Panola counties. So let's talk a little bit about Medicaid, and just as a backdrop, and we say this a lot on the show because I just think it's important for Mississippians to understand this. The total amount of money spent on the Medicaid program, you could consider combined federal and state funds, it exceeds that of the general fund budget.
Yes.
It's $8 billion
Yes.
and headed to $9 billion, honestly.
Right.
It's $1 billion line item to the state, but because the federal match is based on per capita income, we have the 50th in the country, we get the most money
Right.
from the federal government. It amounts to roughly $8 billion a year. Our general fund budget, we just passed it, 7 and change. It's a huge program. And one of the problems with it, of course, is that, as you were talking about, the reimbursement rates are so low. It makes it very difficult to recruit providers, and it puts enormous pressure on our hospitals and everybody that takes Medicaid, which seems to be limited. Very few highly specialized physicians and clinics accept Medicaid, as an example.
Well, the ones that do it purely because they love their community and want to serve their community.
And many in their community only have Medicaid.
But that is the only reason they do it, because when you start running the numbers on that, it usually costs them to do that. But they do it because they want to serve. They're there to serve. And so that's one of the reasons they do it. But kind of interesting on that fact, too, as you just brought up, is you have low Medicaid reimbursement. Medicare, no one's getting rich off that for sure. That's just a little bit above Medicaid. And then we have the lowest commercial rates in the country.
Yeah.
And so I can assure you,
Bad combination.
it's a bad combination. And I can assure you the rent in Oxford, Mississippi is not that much different than it is anywhere in Tennessee.
That's true.
It's probably more. So it's not that we have lower cost, because our staff cost us, if you want to get good people, they cost. And so, so those margins that healthcare providers are operating on are very small. And most of them, the good thing is they do it because they want to serve people, but they also, they work very hard too.
Yeah.
Used to, you have, it was typical that healthcare providers would close their clinics down, one afternoon a week. You don't see that at all anymore.
Yeah.
You've got those clinics going full time. There's not, they're not on the golf course
Right.
in the afternoons, I assure you. So, because you've got to keep those revenues going, because those margins are so small.
Yeah, it's so true. And of course, we were all on pins and needles. The whole country was on what the Congress was going to do to the Medicaid program, because Mississippi's not unique in that it's a huge part of state budgets across the country, just as it is here, the number 2 line item behind education. If you take a look at all the other states' budgets, it's pretty much the case in every other state as well.
Right.
It's massive programs, and it's almost doubled in size, I think more than doubled in size since Donald Trump's first term. We got some 73 million Americans enrolled in the Medicaid program. It's about $630 billion a year of just federal money. It's north of $1 trillion when you put federal and state together. And it's kind of on a runaway train course that's concerning people. So What do you think about what the Congress is doing? The work requirements that would be for the expansion population, something we didn't do here in Mississippi.
Well, so just
as an example.
Well, just to go back to that too, in this expansion population, when we looked at that in the state legislature, the Senate plan had a very, very tight work requirement.
Yep.
And the work requirement they're looking at on the federal level for those expansion states is very similar to the work requirement we had. Ours may have been just a little bit more, but it is very, very similar to what we had. And that was something that we thought was absolutely essential for the state of Mississippi and for anybody. Work is good.
Yeah.
People are healthier when they do work.
Yeah.
And
the dignity of work and,
exactly.
the rewards of working, I just can't understand why anybody would oppose that.
Well, I just thought it was absolutely insane that when programs, many states passed a work requirement and the Fed said, no, you can't implement your work requirement.
Right.
So I thought that was absolutely insane to begin with. So I like seeing the federal government put those work requirements in. Obviously, when we looked at it in this state, that was one of the things we felt was absolutely essential. In fact, our entire body wouldn't have passed anything without a very strong work requirement.
The House version said we're going to try it, but if we get if the waivers turned down by the federal government, we're still going to move forward. The Senate version said no, we're not.
No,
that was a main difference between the two.
It was the big main difference. Yeah. So we were absolutely dead set that you had to have it, because we all philosophically believe too that was absolutely essential. That it's good for people to work. It's healthy,
and that's fine.
So I like seeing the direction of that. One of the things that has driven up the cost of a lot of this is prescription drug prices. And so I think that these are good things, but I think we've got to really keep really address and really focus on those prescription drug prices as well, because that's one of the things that keeps escalating the Medicaid budget. So we can talk about these things, but if we're not really hitting some of those things that make it, more expensive.
Kind of limited what you can do at the state level.
Exactly.
Though, right?
I mean, we're very limited on what we can do at the state level. So if we really want to hit Medicaid and those things, we need to really also be focusing on what is driving up those healthcare costs.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that's driving it up, because, your Medicaid payments for providers and all of that have not changed. In fact, Medicare keeps reducing those provider payments, which is kind of illogical, because none of their costs have gone up, but yet they keep reducing those costs on that. So,
and I know you're married to a physician, right?
I am.
Are you familiar with the so-called doctor fix? Have you ever heard that term?
I have not heard that.
Yeah. So there was legislation. This is, I want to say, pre-Obama.
Okay.
That was supposed to schedule a scheduled increase in reimbursement to providers through Medicare, and every year. Actually, it was supposed to decrease them. I got it wrong. They're supposed to decrease them, and every year they pass what's called the doctor fix to keep their decreases from taking into it. That's literally what it's called. You go look it up right now, look at the doctor fix, and it'll tell you. Bottom line is that the reimbursement rates have been sort of kept low as a result.
Well, the reimbursement rates have been kept low, and they keep decreasing them in many instances for many of the procedures that are done. So if we look at the cost of inflation, and then we look that they keep decreasing those reimbursement rates. So, and all of those things play into account when you're trying to attract a physician workforce here in the state.
Yeah.
There are huge issues with that, because we have a large Medicare population as well. So we have a large Medicaid, a large Medicare population, and so when you're trying to attract those providers into the state, all of those things play into that. And I've seen my husband and them try to recruit people into the state from out of state, and they're looking at those payer mixes, and they're
they go to another state and get paid a lot more money for the same work.
Yes, and even just to our surrounding states, so they can have a good Southern quality of lifestyle, but then they can get paid and reimbursed a lot more money for doing the same amount of work. And so those are things that are limiting us as a state in being able to bring people in.
Well, that's something that has been talked about quite a bit. Is that we need more physicians to increase supply here.
Yes.
We got lots of healthcare deserts, if you will, and it doesn't help when you have lower reimbursement rates. I think it's fair to say, you made this point a minute ago, probably one of the main reasons we even have the degree of adequate coverage that we have now in the States, because these people want to live here. They're native Mississippians, and they want to serve their communities.
Yeah, and every time I see a young person go out of state, especially a healthcare provider, it breaks my heart because the people that are serving these communities, they care about the state, they love the state, and they want to take care of their neighbors, and they love their community. So, but you do see young people saying, "Hey, I can still have a good quality of life for my family, and I can go out of state," and that's something we've got to reverse the trend on, because then that has a ripple effect. When you have a major company coming in, they're looking at healthcare workforce, they're looking at hospitals and all of that. So it all has this ancillary effect on our ability to grow our economy.
Well, and Dr. Edney, you've heard him talk about a lot how that affects our economy. I mean, he's had studies done that talk about our unhealthy population and our number of people that don't have primary care physicians and those sorts of things. Well,
in rural hospitals too. I mean, you're not going to have a company come into an area unless they have an emergency provider within 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes of that company.
Yeah.
So these things all affect our ability to bring in industry. So
we got to keep working on it. That's
we absolutely do. So,
Senator, thanks for coming in. Have a great Fourth. Appreciate it.
Have a great Fourth.
You too. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth Studio. Final segment.
For a flipping good Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Okay, I'm happy to report right now that the Speaker of the House is now controlling the gavel in the House. And I've seen a couple of standing ovations from the Republicans behind him seated, including the Speaker Pro Tem, right? Steve Scalise. Is that what he is? Yeah. He's sitting just behind him as well. A couple of the other faces I don't necessarily recommend. Looks like Bill Cassidy, is it? The senator from Louisiana? Looks like he's also right behind him there. So they look like they're poised to vote on the big, beautiful bill, get this thing to the president's desk for what is supposed to be a July 4th signing. Maybe he'll sign it today. Maybe they'll vote on it today. But looks like it's coming up. It's going to go through. So it's good news. I think it's really good news. We
were both wrong. You were closer, but you went over. It was an 8-hour speech.
Oh, it was 8 hours. Good grief. By Hakeem Jeffries.
The House record for the longest floor speech.
My gosh. My doctor has a sign at the desk that says they don't accept Obamacare. All that simply means, by the way, it's Darren and Jackson, is that they don't have a relationship with the commercial insurance companies that sell coverage in the exchanges. I got to tell you, though, that has actually changed quite a bit. You've seen that, Rhino, the last couple of years, really kind of maybe since COVID. There are a lot more reputable insurance companies that sell coverage. Not really reputable is probably an unfair characterization. Their networks have expanded quite a bit. So even though, Darren, that might be the case with your particular doctor that doesn't take insurance from those carriers, fact is most hospitals and many clinics in this state do accept the coverage that's sold through the ACA exchanges. That has changed dramatically. That was a big problem, you recall, Rhino, because nobody wants to go to the doctor and pay out of pocket and then file on their own and wait for reimbursement. I mean, what you want to do is receive the services and walk out with a copay or maybe a little deductible payment and have the physician, the provider, bill the insurance company and wait to get reimbursed. Otherwise, you got to go out of pocket and wait for that time period for the insurance company to send you the reimbursement check. So that has actually expanded quite a bit, those networks in the state of Mississippi. Those insurance companies have been busy building those relationships and getting physicians to take that coverage. It's probably also a reason, Rhino, when we were talking to Leah Smith the other day, that there are now 330,000 people in Mississippi who have coverage sold in the exchanges. A couple of years ago, it was 100,000. 3 or 4 years ago, it was 100,000. So I think that's increased because, again, more providers are accepting that coverage. That's kind of what's changed there. As of July 1, says David Monticello, I just went on Medicare. It's terrible. One of my prescriptions went from $45 to $660. This is not saving me any money at all. What a joke. Well, did you sign up for Part D, Dave? The prescription drug coverage? Because the Part B standard Medicare, it's got some limited prescription drug coverage, but you have to sign up for Part D. I think you got to pay a little bit for that, as I recall.
Yeah, it depends on what tier it's in. If memory serves, Tier 1 is a $10 copay for generics, and then Tier 2 is their name brand tier, and I think it's what was it?
Okay.
It was 40%, 25% for the Tier 2, and Tier 3 was specialty drugs, was like 40%.
Right. So that, I mean, let's be honest, it's so dang complicated. It's way more complicated than the average person can understand. You know a lot about that because you worked in that industry. You know more about that aspect of healthcare than I do, and I think that's why it's a good fit here. I mean, I've researched that a lot, but not the way I have just basic healthcare policy. But when you get into prescription drugs, it's like a whole nother world, like double everything else, right? It's like all of healthcare and then pharmaceuticals. That's how big it is.
Yeah, I always used to joke about we never had truly happy customers at the pharmacy because they just left the doctor. They're not feeling good.
That's
they
true.
paid through the nose at the doctor, and then they show up at the pharmacy, and I got to pay what to feel better?
Yeah, exactly. So Thomas sent us a tweet here that apparently shows that there's some big difference between what ADP said are the payrolls in the government. Now, I'll freely admit that I have zero confidence in the government's data collection practices and calculation practices with respect to employment. I made that very clear. I don't believe the labor force participation rate whatsoever. I've yet to find a person in the state of Mississippi that's ever been contacted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to compute that metric. But that's a whole other story. He says ending Pell Grants would be great. It will lower the cost of those of us who pay for college. Look, just anywhere government's involved, as you know, Rhino, you talk about Obamacare all the time. Generally speaking, that's the outcome. The people that get the benefits, they do get some value, but the rest of us pay for it. We're out here today. Have a great July 4th. Newsmax 1045 tomorrow. Stay safe. God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.